All right, let me do a screen share. So this essentially is going to be our last group meeting. We'll end this time next week. You'll be done with everything. You'll be sitting here next week on Wednesday at 6 o'clock. Taking a big deep breath, and everything's done. And I'm going to go over kind of our timeline on things that are due and coming up. If you remember, as I'm sharing my screen here, taking a second, but if you remember at the beginning of this semester, and I kind of reminded you as we went along, so you'll essentially have the CBM report that's coming up due this Sunday, and then you have a really quick turnaround on that final assignment, and it'll be due on Wednesday on or before 4 o'clock. So I kind of went through and highlighted some important things in yellow. We're going to cover real quick. We kind of get into it. So first couple things are dates. So the CBM will be due on Sunday coming up, March 3rd, midnight. And then we'll turn right around. Week 8 is very short. You notice that the mock IEP video will be due on that Wednesday, the 7th. A lot of the instructors, we have our final either due on Wednesday or Thursday because they want us to have our grades finalized and posted and submitted by noon on that Monday. And it takes a little while for us, especially this class, to go through the videos and score those and review them. So it gives us a little bit of time. So please remember, it's a quick turnaround, guys, on this week coming up. So we'll turn that in Sunday night, and then we'll do the mock IEP. And I'm gonna go over the things for these assignments real quick. I know I hit on the CBM last week, but I want to touch base on it again just to make sure we're clear and don't have any questions before I get into the mock IEP. So I'm gonna scroll down here, get to the CBM. You'll bear with me just a second. Okay, so just kind of a quick review of what we went over last week as far as the guidelines for the assignment. If you remember specifically, I pointed out a couple new areas for the CBM that will be part of the report that was not included in the informal and the norm reference. Okay, if you remember specifically, I pointed these sections out. I highlighted them yellow. We're going to touch base on them briefly again to make sure that you remember and no one overlooks this. So one of the new sections for this CBM report is you will include a section in your assessment report that does include the probe and intervention. Okay, so literally the probe is the assessment tool that you're using to collect your data points. So you're going to do just a little bit of description on the probe. You're going to name it, provide a brief description of the probe that you used. It could have been a reading probe. It could have been a math. It could have been a reading fluency, reading comprehension. I mean, there's a variety of things you could have done. And then just briefly discuss your rationale for using that probe. You may have suspected, based on your first 2 assessments, student really had some deficiencies and gaps, and you wanted to provide multiple probes targeting that specific deficiency. And to see if the work was grade level appropriate, you needed to make those adjustments. So then you're going to talk a little bit about the frequency of the probe use. Really, I mentioned the goal was to try to get 5 to 6 data points if you could. We condensed that down in an 8-week format for the class compared to the 16 weeks. So I really hoped you were able to get that 5 to 6. That was kind of our goal. Then if you had to implement an intervention, I talked about the intervention last week when I also showed you the new chart and graph that we used and that intervention line. So if you had to implement some type of intervention, you want to name it, describe what you did, also the rationale behind putting that intervention in. The next thing you want to make sure you include is if you had to make any type of modification. So essentially, if you implemented an intervention and you gave another probe and you still didn't see any type of change, did you have to modify that intervention? So if you didn't, just briefly explain that you didn't have to do it. If you did, just give a brief explanation on it. The next thing I wanted to point out in this report, if you remember, was an additional graph that we were going to implement. I popped it up in the example on the sample report to let you look and see kind of how that graph looked. So you want to make sure you include a line graph that shows, your baseline, including an intervention line on there, and also the aim line showing the upward. We hope it's an upward trajectory of your data points. Remember what that graph looks like. I can pop it up again if you that are on here with us this evening think you need to refresh on that. I'll be glad to pop it up. If not, and you feel good about it, remember that it is included on the sample reports in the 805 resources section. That's where I pulled it up last week. So just want to make sure you include that because that is a significant amount of points for that section. Okay, just that graph alone is worth 50 points on that. So make sure you include that extra graph on there showing your aim line, your data points, and then the intervention line. And then something else you're going to do is make sure that you drop down on your reflection. You're going to talk a little bit about or explain the 3 things that you learned about CBMs from going through this assignment. What are 3 things that you gleaned from using the CBMs that you administered? And then within that section, also make sure that you include whether you would or would not use CBMs again, okay, with at least 2 pieces of data to back that up. So there's no right or wrong answer on that, guys. It's just more of a personal reflection on whether you would use it again or whether you would not. Okay, so just make sure that you hit those sections there. Is there any questions on that CBM? I know I covered it more in depth last week, but I just kind of wanted to do a quick overview of that to make sure everyone felt good about what was expected on it.
Would my data be okay if I implemented an intervention before I started, just because I knew the student would struggle too much if I
Yeah,
made a limit of just 1 minute for fluency reading?
yeah, yeah. You can put that intervention line on the front end of that graph before you can put your data points on there.
Hmm.
That makes sense? Yeah. So on that, the example I popped up before you started putting your data points on there, you could just put that intervention line on the very front side, explain that you already had enough data that you felt like you needed to implement the intervention. And so you're depicting it on that line graph. And then after that, you'll put your data points on there. So what you're telling me and make sure I understand is you already implemented the intervention before you gave the probes. Am I understanding that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, that's correct. So you can just put your line on that, the intervention line, and then to the right of that, you can plot your data points. Just make sure you explain that you implemented that at the beginning based on previous data. Okay. Any other questions on that?
Uh, is it just, I guess, the vertical line, the intervention line, it's just understood that that's going to be the intervention line. We don't actually need to like label it on the
You
graph.
don't need to label it just in your narrative on your
Okay.
explanation of the information in there. You can just point out, mention the intervention line. You don't have to label it in the graph.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Remember the aim line? That is your projection, and so you're putting that on there. Then hopefully your data points are going to follow that. That's what we want to see. Okay. Any other questions on that that I can answer for you? Everyone good? Sam, any questions? Good? Okay. Okay, let's drop down and talk a little bit about the mock IEP, what that entails. Okay. So literally, you're going to use all the information that you've collected, your data from doing the informal, the normed reference, and the CBM. And you're literally going to sit down. You can do it at home. You can do it at your kitchen table. You can do it in your classroom, wherever you feel comfortable. And you're going to sit down and basically conduct a mock IEP. And you're going to You scroll down to the information. And literally, you're going to present the information you've collected by administering the assessments through this course in the manner that you're sitting down with the parents and also perhaps a couple of the classroom teachers, building level principals, and go over your information, explain, basically you're explaining to them that the purpose of this meeting is to share information and data that you've collected through a series of assessments that you've given over a period of time this semester to determine strengths and weaknesses, and also determine if you can identify some significant deficiencies, academic deficiencies. Therefore, to determine if you need to make a recommendation for testing, or do we need to make a recommendation for some multiple tier systems of support, whether it's tier 1, 2, or 3 level supports. Okay. So basically, you're just approaching it and presenting the information to give the team kind of the overall view of how the students performed over a period of time. You're going to identify strengths and weaknesses. Also establish some SMART goals, a couple SMART goals, short-term and long-term, that you would like to see the student achieve, and then recommend basically you come back and reevaluate how, if they achieve those goals or not, and do we need to move forward with testing. So I'm gonna walk through this and talk you through it to give you some ideas. Okay. The easiest way, really, or common, I would say, everybody has their preference, but a lot of us are very familiar with Zoom. So I always say, hey, really probably the easiest format to do this is if you just sit down in your classroom, home, kitchen table, wherever you want to do this, and you record this meeting, record yourself presenting as if you were doing a Zoom meeting, and make sure you record it. Okay. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do the introduction to the meeting. Basically, the introduction is you're going to introduce the team. I know and you know that the team is not sitting there with you, but for the purpose of this assignment, we're going to pretend they are, and you're going to open the meeting up. Say, hey, I'd like to welcome everyone to JT's meeting today. I appreciate your time. And I take just a moment to make sure everyone here on the team is familiar with each other, and start off with some introductions. To my left, have Mrs. Jones, Johnny Joe's 5th grade teacher, Mr. Joe, who is the building level principal, Susie Q, who is the speech path, and whoever you feel needs to be in on that meeting, you just kind of go around and introduce them. Even though you know they're not there, we're just going to do it for this assignment, okay? Then we're going to go right into the purpose of this meeting. The purpose is to present some data that's being collected through a series of assessments that have been administered to determine strengths and weaknesses for Johnny Joe. And then you're going to go right into conducted, starting off with informal assessments. You're going to explain what those are. Okay. And then you're also going to explain the norm reference. What norm reference assessment did you use? And then the CBMs. What CBM probe did you use? You're going to mention those, explain why you used them. Then you're going to go into and discuss the student's present level of performance. Okay. And that's basically how they've been performing in the regular classroom. Hey, I've noticed that Johnny Joe has really struggled in math. Math acts fluency, really frustrated compared to his peers. And it kind of led me to the conclusion that maybe I need to do some assessments to determine whether we need to move forward with testing. And then you're going to go from this point right here, and you're going to explain the performance on each assessment. So Sam, if you did a math probe and it was informal, you're going to explain all my informal assessments. This is the particular probe I used to determine, the informal assessment is a very quick, easy to administer, gives you a snapshot view on his math act fluency. It took approximately a minute. I gave him 3 different ones. These are how he scored. Okay. when you're doing this is going to be in a very important part right here is making sure that you present evidence of the student performance, presenting tables, graphs, and a chart. We've already done those, right? You've already put those together. It's not like you're having to reinvent the wheel on this. But when we're doing this meeting, there's two ways you can do this, depending on your comfort level with Zoom and doing screen shares to present the information, or if you want to do it the old school way. The old school way is you can literally hold up that chart as you're doing the meeting and hold it up and show them the informal chart and point to some of the charts and graphs as you're explaining. You can do it that way, or if you feel comfortable with Zoom and you've got those charts on your computer, you can do a screen share and pop them up and share them on your screen and explain them that way. So you got two options. You can literally hold them up, sit here and talk to them where I can, as long as I can see it, or you can do the screen share. And if you're doing the screen share, it's going to capture it on the recording, right? As you're talking through it. Okay. So you got multiple charts and graphs to share, either doing it this way or on your screen as you are explaining the results that you collected, the data, right? You heard me say, as we did some of these Zoom sessions, and the purpose of doing the visual representation is imagine how the parent is when you're sitting there giving them data and you're verbalizing it. It may be going right over the top of their head, but as you are verbalizing that and you have some type of visual representation, it helps them better understand what you're explaining to them. Okay. So you can either hold it up here or you can do a screen share. Okay. You've already done them. Just share them in that IEP meeting. Okay. So that's what we're doing right here. Present evidence in the format tables, graphs, student work. Okay. So these two sections, basically, you're going to explain the results you got while you have the charts up and you're explaining it. For the informal, norm reference, and CBM. After you've done that, the next section we're going to do, or the next thing, is point out what you identified to be three strengths that the student displayed. Not only when you gave the student the assessment, but that maybe you observed in the classroom. Samuel, one of the strengths is that the student's work ethic. You've noticed it not only during the testing, but also on a daily, ongoing basis in the classroom. He's a hard worker. His work ethic's tremendous. And his work ethic was excellent, perhaps when you were giving the test. He was on task. He really worked hard to do his best. That might be one of his strengths. One of his weaknesses could be, or hers, pointing out, maybe could be frustration level gets high and they're quick to get off task. That could be a weakness. Not for the same student. Obviously, that would contradict, right? The strength that just pointed out. But I mean, it could be anything like that. Doesn't necessarily have to be just from the test session. It could be from a classroom observation. Okay. Another strength could be he's a people pleaser. He works to please the teacher or wants to do well at everything, or very well organized. So those are some things you can mention. The next thing is we're going to drop down and look at SMART goals. Okay. Looking at SMART goals. We're going to devise two short-term and two long-term. So when I say short-term, I always tell for this assignment, this is something that we want to set for the student, two short-term SMART goals. And the short-term is looking at 1 quarter, a 9-week period, something that we would like to see the student achieve in the upcoming quarter. And then something for long term is basically looking at the end of the school year. Okay, at least 6 months. Now, right now, we're in March, going into March. So you could say, maybe looking at fall break. It's a long-term goal. Okay. So we're looking at 6, 7 months down the road, maybe 8 months down the road. Short term, looking at maybe a 9-week period. Okay, so that kind of gives you an idea on the time frame there. Next thing is, as you're kind of getting toward the end, as you're wanting to kind of wrap up the meeting, is talk a little bit about expectations that you have as a team sitting in there for the parents or family, if it's their guardian, that could help support and accomplish the goals that you set forward. So just some very basic things, as we're wrapping up, just like to say, parents, some things you could do at home is maybe sitting down and reviewing math facts and doing some math facts drills for, 10 to 15 minutes, 4 or 5 times a week. Or if it's a reading deal, comprehension or fluency, sitting down and doing some reading, whether it's a dad or mom, sitting down and reading with your child for 20 to 30 minutes, 4 to 5 times a week. It could be something as simple as that. Okay, just state something, an expectation that you have for the parent or the guardian to help accomplish the goals that you set forward. And then in conclusion, I would just say, just wrapping up, provide an opportunity for question from the parent. Just say, hey, this pretty much concludes everything I wanted to share with you. As we conclude the meeting, parents, is there any questions that you have of us that we could answer for you to help you at home, or that we could do to help make sure Johnny's successful? Just something we could do working together, and provide that opportunity. And then that pretty much will conclude the meeting. And thank them for coming in, and look forward to working with them in the future. And that pretty much wraps up the meeting. One thing that I do encourage you to do is to help kind of keep you on target, to help the flow of this meeting as you're recording and going through it, is always encourage maybe to print off this part of the rubric and maybe fold it in half and just lay it down in front of you, in front of your keyboard, as you're kind of going through and conducting this, to kind of look down to make sure that you're following that guideline, to help kind of keep you on track, to help the flow of the meeting. And if you will follow these things right here, this outline, as you're doing the meeting, you're going to do just fine on this assignment. Okay. You'll do just fine. If you'll go down through there, just remember, you can do a screen share to share your tables, charts, and graphs, or you can do this as you're explaining them. Either way, I'll accept either way. It's fine. Okay, but we want to make sure we include that, because that oftentimes will help the parent connect the dots on what you're verbalizing to them. When they can see it, helps them better understand what you're talking about. Next thing under presentation skills, really the thing that I'm looking for on this is the flow of the meeting. Okay, just the how the meeting flows. And I always say, this assignment helps you practice. So when you're in there running those meetings and getting into that, always say it helps give you an idea how those meetings should flow. And I've always said to every group, there's nothing worse than going into an IEP meeting and that special ed teacher stumbles through that whole meeting, and you can tell they're not prepared and they've not gotten everything ready to present the information to the parent. So we're really looking at the flow of the meeting. And that's why I always encourage you to follow this guideline right here. If you do that, that meeting will flow. Now, normally, guys, these meetings, these videos usually run anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, that's why I always encourage you. Follow this outline right here. Again, this is basically just presenting your information from the testing that you've done, and giving that information to the team, providing some strengths and weaknesses, 2 short-term and long-term SMART goals, and then also expectations for the parents on how to help accomplish those goals. That's pretty much the gist of the meeting. Okay, and just making sure it flows. Again, I would suggest you don't have to. This is just my suggestion. Since everybody's familiar with it, is utilizing Zoom. I've had different ones use Google Meets. I've had other ones use a variety of other formats that they were comfortable with, and that's perfectly fine. That's acceptable. Everything works out fine that way. I will tell you this. When you get ready to upload that assignment, sometimes these videos, depending on your format, it will not condense the file down, depending on the format you use. Zoom's pretty good about doing it. So if you go to upload that video for the assignment, make sure you're using Google Chrome if all possible. If you use another browser such as Internet Explorer or Mozilla, we've found oftentimes that when you go to upload that Blackboard, for some reason, it's like it gets hung up and it just shows the wheel turning like it's in progress of uploading, and it never does really successfully upload. And when we see that, 9 times out of 10, it's attributed to your browser, which is Internet Explorer, Mozilla. That's the two that causes problems. So I really encourage you to use Chrome if you can. Another thing is, if you want to, if it gives you problems uploading, I've always oftentimes encouraged students maybe to after the video downloads in the Zoom format, is maybe if you're familiar with it, you can upload it into your YouTube and just create a YouTube link, copy the link, drop it over into that assignment submission in Blackboard. Okay, that's another way you can do it. You don't have to, but sometimes that prevents some of the uploading of the video file itself. And if you're familiar with converting, uploading those videos into YouTube, it will compress a lot of that for you, creates that link to the video, and you can just copy the link, paste it over in there, and you're good to go. So any of those ways will be fine to do. It's totally up to you. So, any questions on the mock IEP?
Since I presume that you want this to be somewhat realistic and we won't have any other people in it, would you suggest us to like wait like maybe for like 3 seconds or 5 in terms of time intervals to allow for a question?
Sure. Yeah. You
All right.
certainly could. Yeah, exactly. Any other questions?
So it kind of sounds like we're just compiling everything from all or I guess condensing everything that we've learned in our past 3 assignments and just presenting it in I guess a more accessible as possible way.
So basically, think about it like this, really. You've heard me talk about, like, let's say I I go in as an examiner, psychometrist, and I'm coming in to do the meetings meeting. Sam's getting ready to experience that, I think, with the reeval on Monday, correct? Yeah. So think of it like this. Think of it as you've been examiner for the informal, the norm reference, and the CBM. And so you're going to take the pertinent parts of the data and the results that you have gathered from each of those 3 assessments, and you're basically going to sit down and present that information to the team. Except you're not using the extensive tests like I would as an examiner. You're using the informal and all that. So let's just say, assume you're an examiner and you're doing a lot of the preliminary test up front to determine from this meeting moving forward, is it something we need to consider for testing, for formalized testing to see if they qualify? So you're wanting to pull out the pertinent information you've collected and use your tables, charts, and graphs to back that up, what you're verbalizing, okay? And then you're going to identify the strengths and weaknesses and some goals for them moving forward, and then basically you're going to reconvene at a later time and determine, hey, they
Okay.
they successfully meet the goals. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Now, I will tell you this, we have restructured this, so imagine this. I'll just tell you what this assignment used to look like up until last semester. Okay. So we restructured some of it. This assignment at the end used to consist of, oh, I called it a mini portfolio. And so we would teach you to go in and create a mini portfolio, and you would have to do lesson plans, which you've already done, but the lesson plans were done at the end. In addition to this video, and you would have to upload the lesson plans and the video and drop them in this mini portfolio format. So what we did is we tried to restructure the whole thing, and we had the lesson plans where you did it immediately after you did the informal assessment. You did it right then and already submitted it. So we pushed those back to do with the assessment report. So literally now, all we're asking you to do is the video. We're not having you create a mini portfolio. We're not having you wait and do the lesson plans at the end. So that was a lot at the end, especially submitting a CBM on report on Sunday and then turn around and doing the mini portfolio and having it done by Wednesday. It was a lot right there at the end. So we restructured it, shifted some things around, and all we're asking them to do now is just present it in a mock IEP, and that's your final. So I think it works out a lot better this way, the format you're doing it in compared to how they've done it in the past, because it was a lot right there at the end. It was pretty stressful. So everyone you feel good about it? Any hesitation, any questions? Again, I just made the recommendation on Zoom. If you have another format that you're comfortable with and you like, you're totally fine doing that. Okay, you don't have to use Zoom. You don't have to upload it and create a YouTube link if you don't feel comfortable doing that. You don't have to do that at all. So those are just some suggestions I made.
Well, it sounds like we could, I don't know, using the criteria that you have there, maybe I'm thinking maybe using like a slideshow, even though I don't know that I would really do that in a meeting, but like share a kind of a slide, like do a slideshow and to share the tables and graphs and everything and help.
Yeah, so to give you an idea, I've actually and thanks for mentioning that. I've had some students in the past that it was like using Google Slide Deck, and
Yeah.
then there was a thumbnail shot up here, kind of like the Zoom is right now as I'm doing the screen share. I mean, it looked just like that. So Oliver,
Mhm.
there's a video minimized screen in the
Mhm.
left hand corner, and the rest of it was all the slide deck over here showing the charts and graphs. And so the student
Okay.
went explained and everything that way. So that's fine. I mean, it worked
Okay.
out great.
Okay.
So
Yep.
they had information that they put on slide decks for
Mm-hmm.
they put purpose of the IEP meeting and put a little
Mm-hmm.
narrative on a slide
Yeah.
deck. Next slide deck popped up.
Yeah.
Present levels of performance, and it highlighted some of their present levels of performance, how they've done. Then they
Yeah.
went to the slide deck, and your video was minimized over here. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. That makes
So that's
sense.
how that's how they did the whole multi IEP, which is fine.
Okay.
Just make sure at the beginning that you go through and introduce your team.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
And then they had a slide deck that had two short-term SMART goals. And then they had another slide that had two long-term SMART goals. And then their last slide was expectations for parents to help accomplish goals. And they maybe listed 1 or 2 points on there.
Yeah.
Conclusion, opened it up for questions.
Okay.
Okay. That's perfectly acceptable.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sam, good? Miguel?
So based on your description, are you saying that it's okay to have like something we can read off of while we do this?
You can.
Hmm.
Again, I told you all ago, just a suggestion in the past, I've had them print off that syllabus, these points here that I've highlighted, and they set it down in front of their computer screen as a guideline to help them. I've had students that created a slide deck. They had their points to go over and discuss with their team, making sure that their video was on over here. So, yeah, that's acceptable.
All right,
Yeah.
noted.
Is that understandable? Does that make sense? Okay. Anything else? Everyone good? It's clear as mud. Okay, so between now and Sunday, if you have questions on the CBM, please email me, let me know. If you have trouble with that, try and remember that graph. Remember, it's in that sample CBM report that I showed you last week. And then if you have any questions or if you're struggling on your multi-AP video, please email me between now and when it's due. Remember, next Wednesday at 4 o'clock is the deadline on that. Okay, and tonight is essentially our last scheduled Zoom between now and the final. Okay, so unless you guys reach out to me again, I won't see you on video. All right. Okay. Well, look forward to seeing your videos, and please email if you have any questions or run into any problems. Okay. All right. Thank you guys. Enjoyed it. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you
Have a
for-
good evening.
You.
You too. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for what you've done for us, Mr.
Oh, you're
Dr.
welcome.
Costi.
Thank you. I
Appreciate
enjoyed
it.
it. You bet. Enjoyed having you guys. Thank you.